Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. And today we're going to talk about DNA because we need to talk about your genetic data and why it's at risk. Now, while we're going to be focusing on 23andMe, this actually applies to pretty much any genetic testing company that you basically, as an American citizen, have spit into a tube and sent your DNA into, or however you got them your DNA. And for the backdrop of this story, we're going to talk to, or rather turn to, Carly Page of TechCrunch, although Carly, I'm happy to interview you on this one as well. But here's what's going on. We're talking, as I mentioned, about DNA and genetic testing firm 23andMe, and they're basically in turmoil following a data breach last year and the ongoing financial decline of that organization. Now, they were at one time the pioneering giant in this field, and now they are facing uncertain futures amid efforts to basically take the company private, which obviously then intensifies concerns about what might happen to the genetic data of the 15 million customers of 23andMe. Now, 23andMe, for the record, has seen its value absolutely tank. They went basically, they tanked more than, for the record, 99% from their initial $6 billion peak since going public in early 2021. And then they basically didn't really turn a profit. And so here we are. Now, the lack of profit was attributed to basically waning consumer interest in 23andMe's Use Once test kits, as well as lackluster growth of its subscription services. The company has also basically been floored, obviously, by that months-long data breach that saw attackers steal the ancestry data of almost 7 million users throughout 2023. And if you recall, they initially basically said, well, it's not us, it's the users reusing passwords to other things. We later found out that wasn't necessarily true because they agreed this past September to pay $30 million in basically a settlement as a result of that breach. So, less than a week later, 23andMe founder and CEO Anne Wojcicki basically said that she was, quote, considering third-party takeover proposals for the company. Now, Wojcicki quickly walked back that statement, instead saying she planned to take the company private. But sure, they need money, they need funding, and if it's going to be private equity, then it's going to be private equity. So, damage was obviously done. All of the company's independent board members resigned with immediate effect. And so the question then is, where does that leave the 15 million people and their genetic data? Now, this is exactly, for the record, one of the main cruxes of an article that I wrote for Smerconish on this a couple of years ago as to why I'm not going to do DNA testing. And this is one of the big critical things that I have an issue with. Now, here's the thing. 23andMe is only bound, mostly, by its own internal rules. 23andMe collects a ton of information on its users. And if you're one of the many millions of people that have basically sent your DNA to 23andMe to learn about your ancestry, you might have assumed that this data would remain private under US law in this case. You know, for example, HIPAA. Right? Now, HIPAA sets the standard for protecting sensitive health data, basically from being disclosed without your knowledge or consent. In other words, your healthcare providers need your consent to even send your health insurance or health data to the insurance company, the medical biller, all these kinds of things. They can't give that away to somebody else or an unknown third party without your consent. But here's the thing. And this is something that I've been talking about for quite some time. 23andMe is not covered under HIPAA. They're basically largely bound only by their own privacy policies, and they can change their policies pretty much whenever they want. So, a lack of federal legislation, state privacy laws are an absolute mess. This basically means that if 23andMe faces a sale, the data of millions of Americans is also on the table as well. And the company's privacy policy states that basically that its customer personal information, quote, may be accessed, sold, or transferred, end quote, as a part of a bankruptcy, merger, acquisition, reorganization, or sale. Meaning the Chinese could come in and buy all of this information if 23andMe essentially privately votes to allow Chinese funding. That's what we're talking about here. This is the crux of the situation where you have basically a rising China in healthcare that is trying to be on the forefront of DNA testing, genetic tech, pharmacology stuff, pharmacologicals, like all this kind of stuff. And here they are looking at 15 million basically people around the world, millions of which are Americans, and saying, yeah, I can buy all of that. This is what we're talking about. So with that, you should be removing yourself at this point from the 23andMe database, because you can do that. Kind of. And so, first things first, here's how you essentially divorce yourself from 23andMe to the best of your ability. Log into your 23andMe account and essentially go to settings and then account information and delete your account. Again, that's settings, account information, delete your account. Now, 23andMe will prompt you to confirm your decision, warning that deleting your account is both permanent and irreversible, which you should say absolutely, please, irreversibly erase me. But here's the caveat to the whole thing. As noted in 23andMe's privacy policy, account deletion is, and I quote, subject to retention requirements and certain exceptions, end quote, which could mean that 23andMe may hold on to some of your data for an unspecified period of time. So, for example, 23andMe will still retain your genetic information, date of birth, and gender, and I quote, as required for compliance, end quote, and will retain limited data basically related to your deletion request, and I quote again, including but not limited to your email address, account deletion request identifier, communications related to inquiries or complaints, and legal agreements, end quote. So, on top of this, and similarly, if you've already agreed to 23andMe's sharing your data for research purposes, you can reverse that consent, but you're not going to be able to delete your information. They're already there. And for the record, 23andMe says that about 80% of all 23andMe customers, about 12 million people, have already consented, meaning only about 20% of you could potentially have your data removed. This is a massive problem. And we're not just talking about 23andMe. They're the first on the chopping block to go downhill, but Ancestry, all of the others, understand that you are not formally covered by any kind of privacy law here in the United States. And if you think Congress is going to get together and pass this kind of law, understand right now, they pretty much can't vote for what to have for lunch at the moment, given the bipartisanship or lack thereof in the House and the Senate. And so we're left on our own. And if you've already done this, the horse is out of the barn. If you were planning on doing this, wait. I want to do this. I want to find like those long lost relatives, God forbid, maybe I've got a half sibling out there, or something like that. I think it would be very interesting and fascinating to find it, but I'm not about to give away that which is intrinsically mine, that which cannot be reproduced, that which essentially can't be faked, in the sense of you can fake my voice, you can fake my video, all that kind of stuff through deep fakes, but my DNA is mine. And it's one of the last frontiers of privacy that we have. And so by virtue of that, really just take a good hard look and a good understanding of what you're getting into, especially if you're an American, where we lack the laws for this particular issue. So I'll leave it at that. I think this is a mess, and God forbid 23andMe decide to take a whole bunch of Chinese funding, because the Chinese would probably gladly overpay per the value of 23andMe right now just to get their hands on this, because again, this is what they're doing worldwide. So here we are. Good luck to you if you've already done this. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, just please, attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.